forgive $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt for more than 40 million Americans. Now, not only do these decisions, along with yesterday's decision ending affirmative action, ensure direct harm to the most vulnerable communities in our country, it also further proves what we already know to be true about this Supreme Court, that the 6 conservative justices have an ideological aversion to everyone except for right-wing Christians and the super rich. Those 2 groups need only show up at the court, and they will get whatever they want. I mean, who else is going to take the justices on fancy yachts and private jets and vote Republican so they can get even more goodies? Everyone else, on the other hand, gets nothing. Nada. You're on your own, kid. And the uber rich and conservative Christians know this, which is why all of these billionaire dollar-funded right-wing groups are hunting for cases that fit their agenda and rushing them before the court, because they know that they will win, even if those cases don't directly involve them at all. Both of the affirmative action cases were brought by a group called Students for Fair Admissions, founded by Edward Blum, who is, surprise, surprise, not a student. He's a 71-year-old conservative activist who has made it his life's mission to put an end to race-conscious admissions policies. In the case of the wedding website, the plaintiff, Lori Smith, never even had a gay couple ask her for service. The whole case was based off of a hypothetical. She was simply a website designer who wanted to make wedding websites someday, but didn't want to have to do it for gay couples if they asked, which apparently they did not. And in the case of student loan forgiveness, the court ruled in favor of 6 red states, yes, states, not actual students, who said that the president has overstepped his authority to forgive some of the loans for those making less than $125,000 a year. Funny how you didn't hear these complaints when the airlines and banks got a big old government bailout, or when tons of big businesses, including some owned by members of Congress, had their PPP loans, in some cases millions of dollars of them, forgiven during the pandemic. All right, those policies helped out the rich and the super rich, so they're fine. But what these justices are saying is basically, you don't actually need to suffer any harm in whatever case you bring. You just have to be the right kind of person, with the right religious and political beliefs that fit with our ideology, and we will find a way to make it happen. And if we can't find a way in the Constitution, we'll just make it up. And by doing so, they are literally stripping away the rights and opportunities of generations of Americans. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote in her dissent, this court stands in the way and rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress, which has been the Republican Party's goal all along. Ever since Barack Obama became president, it has been the right's mission to undo all the progress we've made as a country. That is what they're talking about when they say, make America great again. What they really mean is make America 1910 again. And the only way to do that is by stuffing the Supreme Court with enough uber conservatives who will blindly hand down rulings that propel the country backwards to the early 20th century, taking away women's rights over their own bodies and the rights of LGBTQ people and people of color to just live equally. And that is what they have done. With the bang of a gavel, those 6 unelected justices have wiped out decades and decades of progress just because they can. And don't think for a second that they're going to stop there. Joining me now is Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University and political analyst for the GRIO, and Elie Mystal, Justice Correspondent for The Nation. His newest piece about today's decision is aptly titled, "The Supreme Court Just Told Student Debtors to Just Go to Hell." Thank you both for being here. And Elie, I begged you to come back. I know you worked yesterday and were on our A block yesterday, but I wanted to hear more from you. So thank you for coming back for a second round of this. You know, my unified theory of the court is that essentially they only believe 2 classes of people deserve the protections of the Constitution: white, conservative Christians, and billionaires. Disabuse me of this notion if you can.
No, I mean, I would add, open bigots. They think that those people should have rights too. But other than those 3 categories, that's pretty much it. And you see it in today's entirely politicized decisions. I think you've done a good job of explaining kind of the 30,000 foot level hypocrisy of these cases. But when you get into the weeds, they just get worse, right? This is a court that claims to be originalist, that claims to be textualist, right? In the HEROES Act, the act that Biden used to have the student debt relief program, they say the HEROES Act says explicitly that the Secretary of Education can waive or modify student debt, which is what Biden did. But Roberts basically says, no, not that way. and completely overturns the Biden policy. The other hypocrisy that you really see is that if you look at Roberts' other huge national emergency executive power decision, that's the Muslim ban, folks. That's Trump v. Hawaii. And what did Roberts say there? Oh, if the president wants to ban people based on their religion, that's okay. But if the president wants to help people and give them $10,000, that's not okay. So that really, I think, highlights what you're talking about, Joy, that their decisions are not motivated by law or facts or logic or reason. They're motivated based on who wins. And as long as the rich people and the bigots are winning, then that's the way the court's going to go.
And just to stay with you just for a moment, Ellie, I mean, again, read through, it's very lengthy. They write a lot of words to say not a lot of legal theory, right? To just say, we want this result, we're getting there, and here's the way we're going to get there. In Clarence Thomas's concurrence in the affirmative action decision, first of all, he cites Plessy a lot. And I thought Plessy was like verboten, like nobody wants to talk about Plessy versus Ferguson. He sure does. And in one point, make this make sense for me, please. You're a lawyer. In his concurrence, he claims that the Freedmen's Bureau Act, which created the Freedmen's Bureau, that was supposed to rematriculate former enslaved people, 100% of whom were black, back into society. He said, that was a colorblind statute. How could the Freedmen's Bureau, Ellie Mystal, be a colorblind statute? Make that make sense.
It's colorblind if you're like Clarence Thomas and your whole ideological perspective involves gouging out your own eyes. Like that, and that's what Thomas is. Like, he is such a mutilated version of a black justice that he is able to make these proclamations that just fly in the face of law and facts, right? One of the other things that you really realize when you read through his concurrence is just how angry he is at Ketanji Brown Jackson for having the temerity to be another black person on the Supreme Court. He apparently thought that he got to be the only one. He thought that he had pulled up the ladder for everybody else, right? And so he's really he basically throws a tantrum at Jackson. And why? Because Jackson is making the actual originalist argument in the affirmative action case. She is the one pointing out that the 14th Amendment was done explicitly for racial restorative policies like affirmative action, which, as I said yesterday, the first time that happened in this country was during Reconstruction. So this is the history that Clarence Thomas ignores, and that's why he's so fabulous about all of the stuff that's in his concurrence. He's just like plucked out his own eyes, and he doesn't want to see anything that Miss Jenny tells him he shouldn't be able to see. That's where he is in his headspace right now.
Let me bring you in, Christina, because it is very mind-blowing. Let's talk about the cases that came down today, because we kind of all had this feeling, I think all of us did that are on this panel, that they were doing like the one case where they weren't going to literally throw out elections entirely and say that states could just decide who the electors were. That was sort of like the kind of dodge to make you not, remember what they were going to do next. And now they did what we expected them to do. But the way that the right is spinning it, is they're doing the usual thing of saying, no, these guys just believe in what MLK said. They believe in Dr. King. Here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. As Martin Luther King said, people should be judged in content and character. They always say the same thing. This is what MLK actually wrote about affirmative action. I feel this is an important education for those who hear Dr. King misquoted. The vast majority of civil rights leaders, this is the quote, favored affirmative action. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, a society that has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for him. But his goals went beyond that. His policy goals were to not just alter the racial composition of the elite, but also change everything about the economy in ways that today Republicans would call socialist. Your thoughts on this misuse of Dr. King to explain what's being done to people of color and other minorities?
Yeah, Joy, it's also exhausting. I'm leaning on my grandmother's adage of the only time you should be surprised is when you're surprised. We've seen time and time again, Republicans and conservatives constantly cherry pick the words of Dr. King to hide behind their own racism and white supremacy. So yes, this content of their character, I don't want to judge someone by their skin color. Republicans pull that out every single time they systematically take away people's rights. And it's like, well, Dr. King wouldn't have wanted it. It's like, well, first things first, Dr. King was assassinated. And when he was assassinated, he was known as a domestic terrorist, essentially, in your eyes. So let's not hide behind a few sentences that you all want to use every time you take away rights and freedoms from the vast majority of Americans, specifically and explicitly Black Americans. So no one has read the length of Dr. King's speeches on the right. No one has really dissected what he said, because if they did, they'd read that full quote that you just read and know that their cherry-picked quote doesn't hold up.
And very quickly, and I'm going to let both of you comment on this, but I'm going to start with you, Christina. What the Supreme Court has essentially said is that the only group that it cannot be discriminated against or even perceive itself to be discriminated against are white people. But you can discriminate against gay people as long as you say that you're an artist and you're sensitive about your art. You know, if you say I'm an artist, but that opens a lot of doors. So what they're saying is that the only protected class are white people who want to get into Harvard and rich people. But you can discriminate against everyone else. Native Americans who want water, people who have facing the death penalty. Everybody else is fair game. Make that make sense.
It doesn't make sense, Joy, but it brings up a much larger question of, can anyone ever be a full citizen in this country if they're not white men, specifically? As Black people really question and really think about as we move into the 4th of July, you know, we aren't full citizens. We never have been. And what will it take for us to ever be fully included in this country, especially in a moment where we have a Republican Congress and essentially a conservative right-wing court that's being bought by billionaires, systemically taking our rights away, specifically because we're Black?
And the thing is that what it feels to me is that the court has set aside the Constitution now. And they're essentially saying we don't like the 20th and 21st centuries, and we have the power to rid ourselves of it, and we're just going to do it. Because I don't know if when you read these rulings, you see any semblance of, you know, respect for precedent or some constitutional firmament other than in the dissents. All I see are a bunch of Rush Limbaugh listeners who are like, we gonna make Rush's world come true.
No, the court is in full YOLO mode, and they have been since the moment Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. That's when they knew they had enough, they had one vote to spare for their kind of worst fever dreams, right? The point that you're making about the 14th Amendment is so important. What the court has said is that the 14th Amendment does not allow for race-conscious admissions, but does allow for any dime store bigot to refuse to serve members of the LGBTQ community, and it's not going to stop there. Because this argument that the court makes in the 303 creative case, that as long as you have a deeply held religious belief that you can deny services to other people, you know where that's coming next, right? Because the next time I go into a store, I'm going to say, make me a sandwich. And the sandwich is going to say, actually, no, I'm a sandwich artist. And I don't have to make you anything, right? The next time I go for swimming lessons, like, actually, no, swimming is my art. And Jesus doesn't want you to swim. Like, that's what's coming next. So the idea that this is just a small case about gay marriage, no. What Neil Gorsuch and the conservatives have done in that case is really bring us back to a Plessy v. Ferguson standard in terms of public accommodations laws.
And to say that everyone except white Christians and billionaires have no rights that anyone is bound to respect. That actually does sum up this court pretty well. Christina Greer, Elie Mystal, thank you both very much. Up next on the ReidOut, how conservatives on the Supreme Court have clumsily danced around the once all-important issue of standing in cases before the court. The ReidOut continues after this.